right, what's happening? Here we are, TSL Podcast, with a person that has changed my life in a lot of ways. But from over a huge ocean, we have Mark Ottobre here from Sydney, Australia. Or I'm sorry, from Melbourne. Oh man, what an insult! Sorry.
It is an insult.
Well, it's so funny because the only place I've been in Australia is Melbourne, and it is like Austin but better. And Austin's one of the best freaking cities in the world, but Melbourne is awesome. It's like Austin but bigger. Like everybody's riding bikes. There's like no crime in Melbourne. Like if you're in Austin, well, okay, well this all I'm assessing it from is everybody who had bike locks there. They were like these puny little ones, like they were like these iPhone cables, right? But in Austin, you got to have like some pretty decked out stuff.
Yeah, Melbourne's a great city. I love Melbourne.
Oh man, it's awesome. There's another guy I'm going to interview from there. He goes by the name 2020, totally in a different genre of you in a couple days. And then there's an awesome hypnotherapist. I referred him to you, but his name's Rob Mellett, and he's in Melbourne. So a lot of connections, and James Marshall's there and all that sort of stuff. So man, if I introduce you, it's going to be all screwed up. But you're top class at personal training. I mean, we did something together. I lost a ton of weight and gained a massive amount of muscle in a short amount of time. But what is your title? How would you introduce yourself?
Wow, I'm still figuring that one out.
Okay.
I've got a lot of fingers in different pies, so to speak, as it relates to the fitness industry. I own Melbourne's premier personal training studio, Enterprise Fitness. We've got basically a team of 11, including myself. Wow. We run at least 150, 160 sessions weekly, and that number is growing. We specialize in training female competitors. We train a lot of physique competitors, female fitness competitors as well, competing fitness model who after that kind of look, as well as everyday Joes who are looking to transform their body. People, the way I classify it is we look after people who are seeking excellence, such as yourself. You really wanted to step up your game and you wanted to see what was possible in 30 days. So we really cater towards that kind of person who's really looking to step, because my information, it's very direct. I don't like to beat around the bush. I give people the answer that they want or they need and they're looking for. So obviously that's the core part of what I do. But I've also got a podcasting show that I interview people on. I've got some other websites that I've taken most of them down, but I've got my blog obviously. And I mean that's mainly the brunt of it. But I'm also biosignature, write articles, few publications, Being Teach, Oxygen, Muscle Mag. So there's a few things that I do. Yeah.
But the coolest thing about you is that, okay, so you're somebody that I hear this from any great coach, is that you're talking about getting in shape, bodybuilding, training a professional athlete. I know you were working with some guys who were doing more of like a boxing, MMA type thing as well.
Yeah, boxing.
But when it comes down to personal excellence, what I hear from you, and this is like really direct, and I know we're going to hear it more as you talk, is that it all comes down to like complete human being stuff. Like you got to be there mentally, you got to be there emotionally. One of the big things with the biggest rule that I broke that you gave me was go to bed at 11 every night. Get your brain right, be at a good place mentally, and ultimately, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of spiritually, and that's just a really cool thing to hear, and you hear that when people are at the top of their field of anything.
Well, I'm not sure what's the exact question.
There wasn't any question; it was more of a comment, but like so. So let me ask you this, like when it comes down to competing at a big level, whether it's bodybuilding or personal training or anything like that, getting in shape, but at a high level, because that's really what you're teaching, what needs to be there, And I guess to make an analogy, I'm talking to guys about sex and seduction, all that sort of stuff. But really, when I talk about sex, it's two different things coming together to make a new thing. That could be conversation, that could be whatever. But if you're going to have a good social life, a good sexual life, you've got to be a good person. You've got to be communicating with your emotions. You've got to be communicating with your mentality, your physicality, all that sort of stuff. So being in shape, being mentally healthy is a key component to it. And, when I did your workout, and I still do variations of it, that's a key thing that I took from it, is to be good up here. It took me a long time to get there. In fact, when I did the 30-day challenge, I wasn't as on top of my sleep as I am now. But it was one of those things that took me a little bit longer to learn. So being in shape, what's a good way to ask that? Well, let's actually start off this with, what is the main benefit to somebody being in shape?
Well, I think it comes down to people's highest value, really. And everyone's going to interpret the benefit of being in shape, I think, a little bit uniquely to them, and they're going to relate it to their highest value. So if your highest value is picking up chicks, you're going to simply need to see how being in shape helps you do that. Because if you don't see how being in shape helps you pick up chicks, you're not going to have the inspiration to go do that. You're going to need outside motivation, people to say, hey, it's time to go to the gym. But the problem with that model is that once you've picked up a chick, or let's say once you're, they've studied under you or James Marshall, whatever it is, and they've become very good at picking up women, or they've becoming very good at social interactions and these kind of things, the need to work out is no longer there.
Right.
Because they're fulfilling their highest value. They were only working out, as a strategy to improve their chances of communicating socially. So this is where I think it's about being true with yourself and relating how being in shape is going to fulfill your highest value. And again, I'll use a different example. If your goal in life is to run a successful business and to be a businessman, this is where there is often a lot of disconnect, where people say, well, being in shape isn't going to help me make more money. It's actually going to cost me money because I'm not going to have as much time to spend. But once they start going through it, actually, I feel better when I'm in shape. Social interactions are better. People respect me. They respond to me better. I'm able to work longer hours without depleting energy. I'm able to have more clarity at what I do. I'm taking the right supplements that help my brain, and I don't get that foggy thinking at 3 o'clock that my peers get. I'm able to focus on task. So once they see those values of how being in shape physically will help them fulfill their highest values, that's when they will become inspired to do the actions. But until you have that magic point, you're going to need motivation, and that motivation is going to come from trainers or internet programs or anything. It could come from anything, but ultimately it's linking your highest value to your lowest value, so that you see the value of doing it. Because the reality of it is, not everyone is inspired in the morning to get up and train.
Right.
I happen to have a unique set of values that enables me to do that. 8 o'clock is my training time.
Yeah.
I'm out the door, and I want to be training at 8 o'clock till I allow myself 2 hours to shower, eat, all those things. It's 2 hours of the day for me to just train, eat, shower, do whatever, answer some emails if I've got any time, make a shake, all those kind of things. But that's my unique values that allow me to do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me wrong. It doesn't make me right.
No, but I think that's something that people are afraid to do, instead of, because being in shape is something that, I think for me personally, I was out of shape for a long time, and building a relationship with my body is key. And it's an ever changing and growing, way of life, and it's a pretty awesome thing. But man, if I'm not in alignment with my body, I don't feel right. My hormones get all screwed up. I don't think right. And the main components to me that I see, of course, you're the expert at it, I'm just like a fan of messing with my body chemistry, is how much rest I'm getting, how I'm using my body, and then what I'm putting into it. And if my diet's off, if my rest is off, and if my way of using my body is off, I'm off. I'm not. I don't think right. Like exactly what you're saying. It wasn't until about 2 years ago, when I switched my diet around, that I didn't realize that for 15 plus years I was not thinking right. I was thinking at a lower level. I was crashing out. Not being able to motivate myself. And as soon as I started taking some things out of my diet and eating better food, I could work functionally. You know what I mean? And that's
well, that's often what I say to people, you know, who come in for the first time. When you say to someone, "How are you feeling?" What does everyone say? Everyone says, "I'm feeling fine. I'm
yeah,
fine. I'm good." You know,
yeah,
but define good, because you know, if I jumped in someone else's body, it'd feel like shit. You know what I
right,
mean? Like, why does this elbow hurt? Why do my joints hurt? Why do I feel tired? So often people need to be taken out of what they think is fun and you know, live in optimal for just a little while. And when they go back to that fine, go back to that level what they're used to, that they notice a big difference. And that's often what, you know, if we spoke to the version of you 3 years ago, if we asked you, "How you doing?" You'd say, "Fine." You know,
totally,
you didn't know that there's actually
yeah,
a higher level that you can achieve.
yeah,
So I mean, that's really important for people to get. And I always relate it to, you know, when I had a bike for a while. It was a green bike, and I used to ride it, and I always used to wonder why my left hip hurt. And I thought it was just me. I thought my left hip hurts. I need to get some chiropractic adjustment, that kind of thing. Anyway, I got a new bike. This bike was red. It had, you know, the bells and whistles on it, and lo and behold, my hip didn't hurt. And I was like, you know, this is what it should feel like. And I
yeah.
often relate that story back to people when it's, you know, you start to live a healthier lifestyle, the standard of what you expect upon yourself increases.
Well, so I know a lot of people wanted to hear about, you know, losing weight questions, all that sort of stuff, and I want to get into that. You know, just different diets, different ways of working out, all that sort of stuff. But what I want to get into in something that you said is, what is the human body capable of when it's run properly? What can it do? You know, what's a good point of reference? I'm curious.
I don't think anyone. I don't think there's any single example that can answer that question. I mean, from Bruce Lee to Ronnie Coleman to, you know, a guy named Paul Anderson who did strongman feats. You know, he had, for charity, one of his feats, he laid, basically put a big piece of board on top of him, and he had something like 30 cars drive over him over the board. I mean, what is the human body capable of? You see these, you know, these monks in Asia doing all these kind of things. So I don't know if that question can be answered. You know,
So
it's capable of anything, I think. You know?
I'll ask in relevance to myself.
Yeah.
You know, I'm working, like, I work a lot. You know, I like to work. You know, I like to do my thing. I like to run my company and start new stuff and all sort of stuff. So there's that happening. There's anywhere from like 8 to 12 hours. Some days, you know, I might be going 16 hours, but consistently, you know, working an 8-hour day, maybe a little bit more. And then working out wise, I'm lifting weights 2 to 3 times a week. You know, I go hard. It's different from your plan that you gave me, but I do a lot of those same lifts. And then I'm training jujitsu.
Well, it should be different. It should be different. You don't want to be doing the same plan for more than 4 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks, you want to be changing your plan. So, absolutely, it should be different.
Yeah. And so you know, I mix it up, all that sort of stuff. But then I'm doing jujitsu or some sort of like martial arts stuff, which is a completely different type of working out. And so that's like 4 or 5 days a week. Man, I am tired. You know, trying to recover, all that sort of stuff. I often wonder, and being 36 years old, you slow down the older you get. You know, I often wonder.
I agree with that.
What's that?
I don't know if I agree with that.
Then we need the answers from the expert, man.
Well, I think I had an interesting conversation actually with one of my staff members a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a couple of months ago now. But he basically said, you know, I feel really tired. And I go, no, you don't feel really tired. You're just unfulfilling your highest values. And he said, what do you mean? I go, well, you have a value on training that you're not fulfilling currently. You're putting everyone else's training before yours. And at the end of the week, you feel like shit simply because there is a value that you haven't fulfilled. And there's things that have been left undone and you haven't made time for yourself. The simple fact is, if you said, you know what? These are the times that are going to be my non-negotiables. And this is what I'm going to do in these times. Because he's training is absolutely very important to him, and so it should be as a trainer. And he wasn't meeting that criteria. So as the end of the week came, he was finding himself with less energy. So now we simply restructured his week. You know, we've given him a few nights off a week so he can go and train He does a lot of mixed martial arts as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he can go and train now, and he trains, and you know what? He's actually working more hours now than he was before, but he has more energy. And the reason is because he's inspired to see those people, because he has filled up his own cup. Often we come from the perspective of, you know, we need to give. But if we don't give time to ourselves and to have that water overflowing, then our tank is eventually going to run out. So I think a lot of it comes back down to being able to fulfill your highest values. I mean, give you an example. I did a seminar recently with Dr. John D. The seminar was called Prophecy 2, and it was all about mind-body relationship. Now, the guy, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, you know, he's speaking, got ridiculous schedule.
Right.
But his seminars start at 8 o'clock, and guess what time they finish?
8 o'clock? I don't know.
10 o'clock.
Really?
10 o'clock. And we have 3 breaks.
Wow.
Not because he wants a break, but because he knows we need a break.
Wow.
Right? This is a guy, an extreme example of a guy who is very inspired about his work. And, you know, doesn't want to be anywhere in the world other than where he is. So, you know, from that, I use as an example into my life. Am I really tired? Like physically, yes. I mean, I can be tired from training and those kind of things, and I need to rest and recover. Or am I that drain tired where my energy is actually being shifted and I'm now doing low inspiring things? So again, I think this is where it comes back down to the mind. You know, you always have energy to do things that you're truly inspired about. You lose energy when you're taken away from things that are less meaningful to you. You know.
So there's that connection. You know, a guy, you have to have that inspiration. You have to have that true motivation within self, purpose, I guess you could call it.
I believe so. I mean, this is another thing that ties in. I mean, I get a lot of questions about eating and diet and lifestyle and those kind of things. At the end of the day, we want to eat to live, not live to eat, right? And there are a lot of people who obsess about food, but this is why I don't use a one size fits all approach in terms of, you know, just do this diet and you'll be fine. See you later. You know, and I mean, there are a lot of diets that make a lot of sense for a lot of people, but yet people don't get the result, and they always end up in the same way, and the same way is obsessing about their food. If we took and we start treating people as people, why is this person obsessing about their food? Well, it's because they put all their eggs in one basket, and now the value as a person of what they get is simply by how they look. So if you derive your value of who you are in this world by how you look, if you don't look good, you have no value. Therefore, you have a low self-esteem about yourself. Therefore, you seek and search instant gratification. What's the easiest way you can get instant gratification? By eating something, right? So you get that instant gratification, and then you feel guilty around that. Guilt will perpetuate the cycle. So this is where we need to take that individual out and say, okay, you know, there is more to life than just looking good.
Yeah.
What else would you achieve in this life?
Man.
And you start to pick goals. What about business? What about your sexual life? What about your social life? What about your spiritual life? What about your mental genius? And you start to build this person. And the way I relate it is very simple, right? In the stock market, and there are so many principles in so many different industries, but what people do is they look at the one industry that they're in and try and master that one industry, where I think that's a little bit of a mistake. What I like to do is look at every area of life and look at the overlapping principles that relate to everything. So my point is this. If you look at finances, you know, if I gave you $1 million, right, and I said, Steve, I want you to invest this $1 million into one stock, and you invested that $1 million into one stock, and that stock market, and the stock went up, quite a bit, right? And let's say in a day you made another $10 million, and you're like, wow, this is only going up. You're highly elated, but you're also highly volatile. You don't make white. You haven't earned that money mentally.
Yeah.
The next day, because you're on this high, the next day the stock market comes crashing down. You only have $10,000 left. You're highly depressed. You're highly manic. You've gone from this fantasy projection of how great my life is going to be, and it's come crashing down around you. You've had no cushion there to save you. You've lost everything, and now you're this manic person. I give you as an example to see what happens in the psyche as well. What is more sensible, I believe, is that now if we want to develop, I like to think, at least people think of me as, when they meet me, as a very stable person, which I think I am.
Definitely, yeah.
What is a wise approach is if I gave you $1 million and I said invest into one stock, you say no. I'm going to be smart about this. I'm going to invest, $100,000, let's say, into 10 different stocks. If the stock market goes up, some of the stocks might go up. If the stock market goes down, some of the stock markets might go down. You've diversified your risk. Pretty much what I'm talking about is basic diversification, but we don't apply that principle as it relates to our lives. All we do is we go, okay, this is what we're doing, this is who we are. And it's very dangerous, I believe, in the field of health and fitness when we say, you know, I am a bodybuilder, or I am a fitness competitor, or I am a fitness model, because we're deriving the value of who we are in this world by something that is by a reflection, when we really are, we're much more than that. We're people. You know, we're someone's mother, we're someone's son or daughter, we're someone's lover. We have so much more to offer this world instead of identifying our values as just who we see in the mirror. So to wrap it all up and present what I'm saying is, I think the best approach to get people to stick to a lifestyle plan is to give them a reason why to stick to that lifestyle plan. And that reason will have nothing to do with part of the reason will be the reflection in the mirror, but it's also, what is the purpose of that reflection? What is that going to enable you to do? You know, is it going to enable you to live a better life? Because if people don't see the links, then they're going to have this unconscious battle with themselves as to, why do I need to do this again? You know, there's no inspiration to do that. It's fleeting.
Man, you said like such awesome stuff there, and then we switched around some internet connection. But this is what I love. This is why, man, really I want to do a podcast with you on this, because you're talking about the body and I'm talking about this stuff, seduction. But if your goal, if your goal is superficial, it's going to get overridden. If there's no purpose, if there's no self-expression in it, then it's completely gone. And
let me add one thing to that. If your goal is superficial, the closer you get to your goal, the less motivation you'll have to do it. And then you'll wonder why things aren't the same. It's because you had a superficial goal. I'll give you an example. If your goal is to be 9%, let's say, for example, and be, 89 kilos of lean muscle mass, when you get to 88 kilos and you're about 11%, you look good. Is there really a need for you to get any leaner? You kind of start thinking, you know what, I'm good now. For what reason do I really need to get leaner? Imagine it's the same as in the seduction world. If a guy no longer has problems, with social anxiety or any of those kind of things, there needs to be more of a reason for him to go out other than just picking up girls. Because after he's achieved that, then what's next? What's after the gold medal, basically?
Yeah. And that's one of those things that I really believe that, man, sex is such an awesome thing. It's such an amazing thing that can set you straight, but it's such a crazy thing that culturally we don't like, and we get away from it and we screw ourselves up with it and get all these fears. But so is, I'd say like the main functions that the human being was born to do. It wasn't necessarily to drive a car, show up to work, or care about all this stuff, or even do podcasts, but it was to eat, it was to sleep, it was to have sex, to socialize, and to use your body. And the more we get into that, the more we really see who we are. And if we think, and this is one of those things, is that you can make the same analogy to, fitness stuff as well. But if we think that society or culture or our insecurities or our big ego is what defines our sex life or being in shape, man, we're going to hit a wall somewhere. But at the same time, like, hey, get in shape. Hey, have a sex life. Because I think you can self-correct. It's just you need to listen to more people like you, You need to, you're going to get to a point with any of those things, with any form of excellence to where you're going to have to truly express yourself. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there's a massive crossover between the people I see and the people you see, and perhaps that's the people I see are maybe too focused on health and need to be more focused on things like their sexual life. And for you, there's maybe two people who are too focused on the social aspect and sexual aspect. They need to be more focused on looking after themselves. So it's interesting because I can see patterns that happen in no matter what industry and no matter how you're trying to help people. The same patterns occur, which is like, well, hang on, maybe you should speak to Steve, or maybe you should speak to Mark, because it breaks that pattern of this is the only thing I have in my life. I went through, when I was quite young, I went through the 7 areas of life and basically said to myself, I need to find a teacher in every single area. So who's going to teach me mentally? Who's going to help me develop my mental capability? Who's going to help me develop my finances? Who's going to help me develop my physique? Who's going to help me, model a good family from? Who are some people who I can model family of? Socially, who's a good example of, someone who's very social? And just went through like that and essentially found mentors and people I thought, I can learn from them and expand the whole pie of life, not just a slice.
I think everybody would be curious to hear, like, who was the most influential teacher in any one of those areas?
Without a doubt, I'd probably say John DeMartini. Simply because he's the one who gave me the tools to actually think that way. How do I empower the 7 areas of life? So I would say he's had definitely a massive impact on the way I structure my life and the way I think about life. He teaches a lot of what he calls universal principles that overlap, and that's forever helped me understand things and develop my curiosity between industries of how do things overlap and how do things work, and can I take this principle from business and put it into training? Oh, yep, that works. It's a universal principle. It works no matter what. So, yeah, I would say John.
Well, it's funny. So principles are big with me, and I have like a real pet peeve when people use that word not for what it means, because it should be able to interact. And it should have multiple functions, I should be able to take principles that I believe in towards seduction. I mean, they're the same, and take it to weightlifting or whatever. But you brought up business, and you say you have 10. You have a staff of 10 now? Because I think a year and some change, you had like 4 guys. So it's grown quite a bit. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. Man, this is something business-wise that is so hard for me to get. It's taken a long time. But seduction-wise, no problem. And here's the correlation. When I was about 5 years old, it was like, you don't have to, if you make money, it doesn't mean you're happy. Okay, I made that distinction. Being happy is separate from making money. But for 30 years past that, I did not realize that if you were making money, you could also be happy as well. I thought that it meant you were unhappy. It's kind of like when somebody says, I have some problems with capitalism. And then they call you immediately like a socialist or a communist. And you're like, no. I just have some problems with this way of thinking or whatever. So it's like to look within those areas, or like saying, I like to lift weights. And they're like, oh, you're a bodybuilder. No, it doesn't mean I'm a bodybuilder, or it means you're against a certain style of working out or something like that. And so, man, that took me a while to get. But in seduction, clearly we can see people. It's like, oh, well, you're just this sex-obsessed guy. You're unhappy and miserable. There's plenty of examples of that, right? Because it's very easy to fall into that trap. But for me, it was like, well, I don't have to be unhappy if I'm sleeping with a lot of people. Now my life is very different, but, I could see that as an expression of myself. Sex is good, no problem. And that was easy for me to distinguish for myself, and then took me a while to learn to communicate that to people. But, it was like somehow, because, there are many different areas of our life, we learn. And if we don't ultimately merge those, whether it's, our values, kind of like what you said, those 7 areas of life, which I couldn't repeat back to you, but, health, your perspective, your mentality, man, if we don't take what we're good at and what we have a clear vision of and allow it to teach and influence and inspire in other areas, and then, we start to, the other areas teach the other areas, yada, yada, yada. Man, I think we're really doing a disservice to ourselves. And that's, again, what I see with you, like coaching-wise, or teaching-wise. There's all this overlap of stuff that I'm just like pulling out like, wow, this is great. I'm going to use this with my clients about how to express themselves, how to assert who they are. How does that make them a man? One of them being instead of doing. You've got to be what you believe in rather than just do the actions. You have to invest yourself. Major influence, from you is cool stuff. Yeah, awesome. I love it, dude. I love it. Hey, let me get into some like basic stuff that people are going to want to know. Man, there's a lot of people out of shape. You don't know where to start. I didn't know where to start. I was 30. I did a lot of drugs. I mean, like, man, like just to the point of ridiculousness. Basically from 15 to 30. I did not work out at all. And getting in shape, I bought a book. I bought Body for Life. I tried to eat, and I lost some weight. I got, a little bit in shape. But here's what happened. From 30 to about 33, 34, I got in what might be good shape, but I was still at maybe like 20, 25% body fat. I couldn't lose, I couldn't get past a certain threshold. And it would be like I'd be really good at running, then I'd be really bad at strength, or I'd get really tired with, it's just I wasn't a balance, and I wasn't able to do the things that I wanted to do. And the fear was, man, maybe I'm too old. Maybe I destroyed my body too much. And it wasn't until I started to, change diet, change exercise plans, work with guys like yourself who were actually experts, not just some internet whatever guy selling some six-pack whatever thing. But what is a guy who just, or girl or whatever, who's just, man, you're out of shape, you don't really have much motivation. Where do you start?
Very good question. I think probably the best place to start is what you actually intend, and being very clear on what you intend. What do you want? What do you want to achieve? Because I mean, even that question, like where do you start? It's going to be slightly different for the population. It's who are we dealing with. So I think some wise advice would be to find someone who can guide you. Because I mean, if you come to me and you say, where do I start? And you're a mother with 3 kids going through menopause, you have a very different starting position to someone who's 21, male, and looking to compete. The male who's 21, I can tell him, I can write it on a piece of paper. This is your plan. See you later. Consult 10 minutes. Done. The 45-year-old menopause example, things are going to be much slower. They're not going to be as open to change. So, getting them just to practice one habit a week, that's enough, as long as those habits are sticking. Whereas, the 21-year-old male example, he just wants to be told, hey, what do I do? I mean, some very simple advice, and to kind of give, it's very hard to get this advice wrong, but I mean, it's eat things that are hunted, fished, gathered, and plucked. In other words, eat real food and focus on a real food diet. But I think really where to start is sitting down with someone who you connect with and who you feel has your best interest at heart, not their best interest at heart. And I mean, I've got a podcasting show that gives a lot of good info out. Listen to that, educate yourself, put your health into your own hands. So, I mean, they can start there by educating themselves. That's a good reference, and I use that, obviously. I've done them, so I know what's in those podcasts, and I know that everyone I've interviewed has a slightly different take, but at the end of the day, listening to those podcasts will guide you towards better decisions any way you slice it. So that's where I'd start.
Yeah. And man, what is the difference between a weightlifting athlete and like an MMA style athlete? Because I know you train both. And
well, I don't train any MMA athletes. I've trained a few boxers, but yeah, I've trained definitely a few boxers. What's the difference between a weight styling athlete? I mean, let's say a competitor or a bodybuilder. Their whole training regime is going to be in the gym. It's solely for the purpose of looking good. There's no real other function other than physique, right? If we look at the boxer, for example, well, weight training is the nice thing to do if they have time, kind of thing, right? It definitely, is it going to improve their game? It absolutely will. I've worked with a fair few boxers and seen quite a transformation in terms of their in-ring ability from doing so. So, I mean, in any principle, a stronger athlete's always going to be a better athlete. Keeping in mind, if someone is at the same skill, you get 2 guys, exactly the same skill. One of them is stronger. The other one, the stronger one's going to win. Simple. So, yeah, I mean, like one guy I'm training at the moment, he should be going to the Commonwealth Games. He started weight training with me, strength training. As I said to him, his priority in terms of his training is boxing. I train him, make sure his external rotators are nice and strong because he's a boxer. Get him a base strength, train him, progress him. I want to get him as strong as possible, but at the same time, I respect my position. I'm not the boss. he needs to be able to box. So I can't train him as regularly or as hard as if he's got a fight coming up fight. What he squats is irrelevant so long as he can knock someone out in the ring. So that's where the respect aspect has to come. What is the function of his training? And that's to knock someone out. Whereas when you come to someone who's lifting weights, purely it's aesthetics. So you can be it's a lot harder to get wrong. Athletes are much harder to train because there's so many variables in training an athlete. There's no variable. I mean, in bodybuilding, it's just hit the muscle from a different angle, basically. Make it get bigger. Hit it, this week you did squats with 8 reps. Next week you do squats with 12 reps, put a bit more weight on the bar, superset it with leg press, come up with different ways to hit the muscle. It's not that hard. But you apply those same things into training an athlete. I mean, you can definitely overtrain them, make them too sore for their training and their skills, not peak them at the right time. There's so many variables that you have to respect. So athletes are harder.
Yeah, man, it's a trip too, because especially when you're competitive in any way, I mean, you don't even have to be at the pro level. It's so easy for myself to get caught up in overtraining or doing the wrong thing. It's like I might, let's say like, man, when you really don't know and you're training to do some like jiu-jitsu or maybe even boxing or whatever, and you just commit to running and you get pissed off when you can't make 5 miles in a certain time frame.
This is where it can be a little bit dangerous because, I mean, using the example again, Andrew, the boxer, in boxing there's been this mentality that you have to run. And I said to Andrew, how long do your rounds last? He says 3 minutes. Okay, so you need to be able to perform for 3 minutes and then recover in 60 seconds, then perform for another 3 minutes. I said, is that correct? He said, yes. Like, okay, so what relation does running have or impact does that have on the sport? In my opinion, and there's obviously people who can disagree with me, and that's fine, it's very little past the point. You can use a base of aerobic capacity, and that's of benefit, and that can be of value, no doubt. But at the end of the day, the training that you do needs to have a crossover over into the sport. I mean, an easy example to kind of drum this one home is if you get someone who competes in a throwing type of sport. So say, for example, discus throwing. The event's over in less than 10 seconds. Right? So their aerobic base is irrelevant of how long they can run. Why do they need to run for? They don't. They need to be able to pick up a discus and throw it as far as they possibly can. So their training needs to be alactic, needs to be based in power, and they need to be able to express maximal strength. So running has very little crossover. I mean, training them for aerobic can actually have a detrimental effect. So this is where you definitely need to be particular if you are doing jiu-jitsu. How fit do you need to be for that? And then is it a alactic fitness that you need, an alactic capacity fitness that you need, meaning be able to repeat maximal efforts, or do you need more of a lactic fitness? Boxing is a mix of most of the MMA sports is a mix of both. Don't get me wrong. You need someone who's powerful that can sustain the rounds, but it is also dependent upon how that person chooses to fight. Are we training someone who's their game plan is knock them out in 3 rounds or knock them out in the first round? You train like Brock Lesnar, you train him powerfully,
Right.
Someone like maybe Anderson De Silva or someone who kind of takes a bit more time, isn't going to necessarily go for the kill straight away, be a bit more strategic. They're going to need more of an aerobic base.
Yeah.
So not to say that Brock Lesnar doesn't need it, because what happens if the round does go, over? He's going to need that as backup. But this is where you're training, the athlete or a fighter. It needs to be specific.
Man, but I think that's so important because if you get in that zone, you'll kill yourself doing the wrong thing. You'll be doing something that isn't good for you and getting this head game about it and screw your body up.
You can't go north and south at the same time. That's the definition of going around in circles, trying to go north and south at the same time. So, a lot of the time when I work with people, especially athletes, I say to them, look, the first couple of months with me won't be fun. It's not going to be, you're not going to be hitting max deadlifts and max bench press. So I'm going to break that fantasy for you right now. I need to see where you're at. And most of the time, the athlete's structural balance is horrific.
Totally.
So they can't do full squat. They can't even get into the position.
Totally.
Their hip flexors are too tight. Their external rotators are too tight. There's a lot of adhesions. So this is where we use those first couple of weeks to get them to optimal range. Because if I can get someone to optimal range, and that's the only thing I can do for someone, I have improved their game. I have reduced their risk of getting injury 100%.
Yeah.
If they've got the maximum range of motion. So I'm going to go bang for buck. I'm going to make sure they can move optimally and move ideally before I'm going to start loading them. It's phases. And I say, we do this for the first, 6 weeks or 4 weeks, however long it takes. We get this right. Then we can progress you. We can't progress you until we get this right. This is basically what long-term periodization is. It's taking someone where they want to be and when they want to be there by, and then planning all the steps backwards. And I mean, we can use indicators of, let's say, for an athlete like I do with the boxers, their fat grip incline barbell bench press. If I want a 52 kilo boxer to be able to bench press, let's say 70 kilos with a fat bar, where is he now? And what is the limiting factor? Is it his shoulders? Is it his triceps? And getting all those things strong so that he can achieve his goal. But we have an understanding of where he needs to be. And I mean, if someone starts and their starting point is, well, you know what? I can't actually do a bench press because I have a bad shoulder. Well, that's where we start. We start with a bad shoulder and we rehab the bad shoulder and we open that up. And we do exercises and movements that are going to get that shoulder strong so that eventually he can do a bench press. And when he can do a bench press, then we can use variations of the bench press. And then, we progress from there. So there's always a progression model of getting someone strong. Yeah. But that's what it is. It's long-term periodization is what I'm talking about.
Man, that's something that, really for me was so important. And even hearing you talk about it, it's like, geez, I got to practice. Like, form is so important. And like working with Luke Lehman that was really good. It was just really good. And I know I'm still like doing things wrong, but man, I'd be doing things a lot worse. And it's just, it changes so much, and I could still get caught in this, but like, let's say if I'm doing a deadlift or doing something which, used a lot of power or whatever, man, you can really hurt yourself if you're pushing for the weight and not respecting the form. And if you don't, and sometimes, when you're doing that deadlift, squat, whatever, those barbell type exercises, when people are doing those wrong and then they don't want to go down in weight, man, it's, it kind of messes with you mentally. But
it's also understanding the movement, because a lot of the time, a good example is chin-ups. I have a very definite expectation when it comes to chin-ups. You start from a full hang. Doesn't matter who you are, male or female, the starting position of the chin-up is a full hang. There is no momentum. You can't start with bent arms. It's a full hang. Then you pull yourself up. You get your basically the bar should touch your clavicle, right? And then when I see someone do a chin-up, they go, oh, yeah, I can do chin-ups. I look at what they do, and it looks like they're having a seizure on the chin-up bar, right? They're using their legs, their hips, they're kipping. They're not starting from a full hang, all these kind of things. So it's also defining what you expect and also defining the movement, because the unfortunate thing is, a squat is a great example. I mean, there are so many interpretations of a squat. You have your weightlifting squat, your high bar squat, your bodybuilding squat, your powerlifter squat, all these kind of things. But it really is whoever you're working with, allowing them to, and obviously whoever you work with, you want them to know and have a standard of what they're looking for. But for me, a lot of the time, it's redefining for people what my expectation, so that they can actually meet it. Because a lot of the time, people think, okay, this is a squat. Well, in my book, that's not a squat. They haven't gone deep enough. It's a half squat at best. So. I mean, you can definitely hurt yourself. And the problem with that is, when people start focusing on load, the mobility decreases, because now they've got over tight hip flexors and they're not working muscles evenly. So there's a lot of problems. But you made a good point, especially with, you invested with Luke Lehman for, I think it was a short period of time, but you're much better having seen Luke Lehman than have not invested at all, because it's compound interest for you, right? So you invested those couple of sessions. Okay, you've learned a fair bit. Obviously, there's more to learn, but you're a lot better from having done those sessions. Yeah. So that's where I recommend professional coaching for everyone. And a lot of times people try and do it really cheap. I'll go see the cheapest trainer in town. Well, it's not always the best. For me, that's a waste of money for a lot of people, because you're not only wasting your money, you're also wasting your time, but you're going to have to spend more money eventually to learn the right advice. So you might as well just go to someone who maybe they charge a little bit more, like we do, but you're going to get the right answer first time.
Man, totally. And for your body, like it's so different. Do you think that a lot of the stuff that we talk about here has to do with masculinity and of course as well femininity too, body image, all that sort of stuff. But I think in coming towards masculinity, I think there's such a problem, especially with personal trainers at the, I guess you could say the lower level, of just push, work hard, sacrifice your body. Or, I mean, man, I work out at a pretty awesome gym for like martial arts type stuff. But you hear this over and over again. No, man, you got to push, you got to fight through it. And if you think that that's all there is to whatever it is you're trying to do, whatever way you're trying to get in shape, I think that, man, you're never going to find the right direction. Like if it were for bodybuilding, man, just push, do it, go hard. If I were doing that, I'd be doing stuff wrong. I'd hurt myself, man. And same thing with jiu-jitsu, same thing with, stand-up kickboxing, whatever. If it were just pushing myself, man, training when you're hurt is like the worst thing that, the will has to be there, but it has to be used right. Do you think,
correct? Yeah.
Well, do you think like the image of, how to push yourself, how to be efficient and push your body is distorted and, somehow trickles down into overworking out or working out in the wrong ways?
Well, I think it comes back down to what I said before. I mean, I have a concept that I, tell all my trainers and all my clients, and that is simply fail with grace. So, I mean, you've got to have balls, right? You want to have balls in your training. You want to train hard, absolutely, definitely. But it's training hard with the correct movement pattern, and doing the correct thing. Because an easy example would be in MMA, or in jiu-jitsu, someone's teaching you, a grapple, or, they've got you in an arm bar, and they can snap your arm, and, train hard, push through it, you're going to get your arm snapped. That's stupid for you to, not tap out, right? It's pointless. Whereas, if you tap out, you learn. This is the same thing with weight training. It's not like it's kind of hard to explain over Skype, but on a bench press, you want to push as hard as you can whilst keeping everything locked in. If you start to roll your shoulders forward, that's a bad sign. You want to be able to fail in the position where everything is locked. That way, you're not gonna hurt yourself. You're not gonna hurt your shoulders. But the minute your shoulders start coming off the bench and they roll forward, that's when you can do yourself injury. So I mean, it's a concept of failing with grace. Yeah, I got beat on the mat. Yeah, the guy got me an armbar. Okay, I'm going to tap out. There's no point. It's pointless for me to hold that armbar and show someone how tough I am and break my arm. It's not going to improve my performance. It's actually it's negative to it.
Yeah.
You can call me a hard ass, but it's not basically training smart.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you about something that everybody wants to know. It's real popular in the U.S. I'm not sure if it's popular in Australia, but low testosterone. In my groups, there's huge talk of it. There's guys that are of every age group, all the way into their 60s, and like, what do you say to people? I know everybody's different, but like, what are some just core things guys can do to?
I've got a lot to say about this issue, actually. I wrote an article maybe a couple of years ago now for T Nation. People can look it up on Google. Just type in T Nation fighting the T killing toxins, and it's about an article about how worldwide male testosterone, the norms are lower. So what that means is in the 70s, our standard for testosterone was higher, but the problem is now everyone's coming in with low testosterone. Simply drop the standards of what it means to have, what is normal testosterone. So when we do look at our testosterone results, we always want to be on the high end. So, I mean, there's a number of reasons for that. Going back to, since the 1950s, we've dumped over 85,000 chemicals in our environment, none of which have been tested on children. Half of which have been tested on children, and none of which have been tested on adults. And the big one is the xenoestrogens. So these are things like BPA, phthalates, things that mimic estrogen in the body. And there's actually another interesting documentary called The Disappearing Male.
Yeah.
And again, it's about how these interact with our body and essentially lower testosterone. So there's a couple of things. Anything that has a plasticizer in it is one of those agents. So say, for example, air fresheners. Air fresheners have plasticizers in them. That's why it holds the aroma. These are things as xenoestrogen. Plastics. So if you microwave all the time in plastics, it's going to leach into your food. You're eating xenoestrogens. This is why pesticides is a big one, obviously. So if you're not, and I understand not everyone can buy organic and these kind of things, but you want to buy organic where possible. But they can also be a source of xenoestrogens. As a base, generally what you look at is zinc to increase someone's androgens, and also HCl production. So that's generally a good supplement for most males to take. But I mean, obviously, you can look at things like, and certainly we do, and that's red blood cell count zinc to see where someone is, because that can often be, if someone's zinc is low, then generally what you'll find is their testosterone is low too. So zinc as a supplement's very good. Eating ample amounts of protein, for your body weight, that's definitely important. A lot of the times what I find is simply people are there's a lot of different forms of stress without going into it in too much detail. There's foods that you eat that can be stressful to the body, and there's foods that you don't eat that can be stressful for the body. That means you're malnutrition, basically. So you're not able to cope with the stress that if you're training, so many hours a day, and you're not refueling with adequate protein, adequate carbohydrate, adequate fat, that's a stress to the body, because now it can't recover. So protein, good sources of quality protein is very important. So, I am obviously a fan of getting it organic, grass-fed, all those kind of things. But in terms of supplements, my first supplement would be zinc, followed by magnesium, and you could use a topical form of magnesium. I use the Poliquin brand. I use the Ubermag and the topical mag, both of them at the same time, as well as the zinc. Fish oil can definitely, it's not going to necessarily increase testosterone, but as a general health product. Other things that can specifically increase testosterone, there's many pathways you can do it. You can do it by lowering cortisol, and to be honest, that is my preferred pathway. I would rather figure out go to the root cause of why someone has low testosterone, than simply going, okay, you need bioidentical hormones, which, we don't do here. There's a lot of legal implications doing bioidentical hormones, taking steroids and these kind of things. So if someone wants to do that, they do that on their own accord. But there are many ways to do it, right? You can take DHEA, but for me, we always use the supplements, natural supplements. Personally, I prefer to do it, find out what is the reason for it. Most of the time I find it's a stress of some form. Using supplements that actually mitigate the stress, again, these things can be things like pantheninic acid, otherwise known as panthenine, high doses of vitamin C, zinc, magnesium, looking at those issues first, addressing diet, and then going from there. And from there can sometimes be things like licorice extract, holy basil, sometimes tribulus. It just depends on the person.
Yeah, there's just a lot of talk about it, and guys who've, really said they've tried everything, and and really
they've tried everything except cleaning up their diet.
Yeah, one of the things that that one of the guys, or a couple of guys actually in my groups, they're saying like, man, I don't actually want to go on TRT or some sort of steroid because I don't want my body to stop making testosterone.
Well, let me just cut in there for a second. Some guys will need to go down that road, right? Depending on their age, because the reality of it is, if you are looking to build mass and be at the optimal levels, after a certain age, testosterone, no doubt, it's going to drop off, right? So for some guys, that may be the last resort, and the reason why I treat it as the last resort, because it should be dealt with respect. And I feel, especially in gym culture, it's dealt with a lot of disrespect. A lot of guys are just going, oh yeah, just take this. No, and they don't have any blood work, or they haven't really tried anything. They haven't addressed their zinc stores, they haven't addressed their diet, they haven't addressed their training, they haven't addressed their shitty lifestyles. So this is what I mean by it may be for those certain people, that may be where they need to go, but it should absolutely be done with respect. You should get your blood work done and work with someone who really knows what they're doing. There are plenty of functional medicine doctors out there who have expertise in this area. Obviously, find a good one, because as with anything, there's varying degrees. But getting someone who can use sensible dosages, and that's the thing, right? If it is so far gone and you have shut down, you're only using the natural approach is only going to get it up so high. So this is where you might need bioidentical hormones to intervene. So for me, just as a kind of a comment on it, I'm not against it. like, no, it's bad, never do that. Because for some people it's literally, I mean, we've seen a couple at our studio where, they're consulting with their doctors, and their doctors have said, you know what, you need testosterone replacement. This is the only option for you. And I mean, these are males who are generally a bit older, in their 40s, 50s, who have gone down this way. And it's not the guys who are looking to get in shape, those guys who are young. That's not you. You don't do that. It's reserved for respected.
Well, I mean, the guys that are talking about it are in their 50s, and they've done their due diligence on it. In fact, really have done just many. God, one guy in particular, he's done so many different diets, so many different ways of working out, diet, taking things out, putting things in, and to him it was just like, man, it's just too much work, and I'm not. My blood work isn't showing the results for it. But he's really, I mean, like his whole thing is he doesn't want his body to stop taking testosterone or making testosterone, so he doesn't want to go on anything just yet. But it looks like that's what he's moving towards.
Well, for him, it may have been too far gone.
Yeah.
That's the reality. So this is where you get a doctor to, give him the news or give him the advice.
Yeah. So man, that's interesting. I had forgotten you've talked about all those things before, but yeah. Should talk to you more. Hey man, so I know you got only a little bit of time left. I have a question that may not be so interesting towards, actually it could be, but I remember when Luke saw me, he goes, well man, I'm going to show you how to do Mark's thing. But he said, man, at some point, and then he now works at the Polican headquarters in Rhode Island, the Institute. But he was like, man, you have bowed legs. That's why you got knee problems. He's like, that's all like hip and ankle problems. And you've said the same thing, and he was like, man, if you lift properly with the right form, that can be corrected. And also, I've heard this from many other people who are really into the body, but I can never find, you almost like need to talk to somebody personally about it. So how is it that lifting or certain types of exercises can put somebody's body in alignment? And I think that's also something you told me during my workout plan. You're like, if you have knee problems, that's usually a hip or ankle problem. How do those get corrected?
Well, the body is a adjusting mechanism, meaning that if you have a tight hip flexor on your left side, the right side has to compensate, or the right ankle will have to compensate. So the body is always compensating in one way or the other. I mean, the best example of that is in your spine. If you are protruded forward, the lumbar region is going to be protruded backward. It's always balancing itself. And it's balancing itself so that you can walk and function and do all those things normally. So it's simply a matter of hypertonus and muscles being too tight and muscles being too loose, basically. So how do you do it? I mean, you identify and rectify by strengthening and lengthening, as the old axiom in, I suppose, rehab. So it's pretty much as simple as that. You train your body full range, you demand it, you get those weak muscles stronger, you get them to do their job. Hey, muscle, wake up. This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to stabilize Steve's knee. No, not that muscle. You're supposed to stabilize Steve's knee. That's essentially what you're doing with exercise. Take it through that full range of motion. But this, again, is where long-term periodization comes into play. For someone like you may not be ready to squat. So, therefore, we need to backtrack that, make sure your knees are good. How do we do that? Split squats, things like Poliquin step-ups, Peterson step-ups, making sure you can do those movements correctly, and then moving forward. And then eventually, you can build yourself up to squat. Because what we're doing is we're training the muscles that have been lazy. Now, hey, you're supposed to do this function. You do that through exercise. And that's not going to be, a couple of reps. It's going to take you, thousands of reps over time to really drum that into the muscle and get it stronger. And, so it understands that this is its role in the body.
Man, what's interesting is my knees are bad. And, everybody says don't do lunges. But doing split squats in the way that you had broken it down for me and that Luke showed me is no problem. No problem. I mean, it's really crazy. But let's say if I do, if I go and work out with some guys, they're doing some plyometric stuff, and I go and do these jump lunges, how they're doing it, form's not really being taken, it's fast movement, all that sort of stuff. I can really hurt myself
Hurt
or
yourself.
overwork
Yeah.
my knee.
That's exactly right, because the knees aren't stable. So if you're doing plyos, when you land, the knees will probably be coming in because you're bowed leg, which means there's no stability there. So you need to, again, using long-term periodization, backward plan, get the knees strong, and then work up to the point where you can do jumps without knees coming in or any of those. And I mean, that's probably the biggest, in terms of personal training and strength training, that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I see is people doing jumps too early and trainers not having the knowledge of what the end of a jump, what it's actually supposed to look like with a client. People's knees aren't supposed to come in. They're supposed to remain solid. It's coming in, it demonstrates that your knees aren't strong enough to do the jumps, which is a problem.
Yeah, it's so interesting when you look at a knee which is off, like mine. It's again, man. I need to make a trip to Rhode Island or something. But you can see. I mean, you can see that the kneecap is off from the tibia or fibia. I forget whichever one, but the shin basically. And it's like, people never look at that, or a doctor will never look at that, or not always. I don't want to say all doctors, but very often they do not look at those things, and I don't know, something to be corrected. But I know you got to get out of here, man. What words of actually? Let me just go back to this. The 7 things that you said of ways to live. What were they again? And what would be like a ending message that you could?
7 areas of life.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll break it up into spirituality, mental development, finances, business and career, health/beauty if you're a female, social, and family. So that's the way I break it. It's not really my breakdown. It's, again, borrowing from John D. Martini. Breaking those down, what I would do, have goals in those areas. So who you want to be in each area. For example, who do you want to be socially? Do you want to be the guy who's able to go out and speak to women and command that area of your life? Do you want to have amazing social networks? And one of my goals was to have amazing social networks over the globe. Hang on, what are we doing now?
Right.
You're halfway around the world, and
totally, it's awesome.
Friends,
actually,
this isn't by mistake. You know what I mean? This is by design, that we're getting to catch up like this. And so set who do you want to be in those areas. And then set what do you want to do in those areas from who do you want to be. So what do you want to do? Do you want to do podcasts with people like Steve and myself? And what do you want to do financially? Do you want to have a very meek existence, or do you want to have an extravagant? I mean, it's not right or wrong. Don't judge yourself for it. But what do you want to do in those areas? And ultimately, then what do you want to have? Do you want to have a great body? Do you want to have, is there a certain social experience that you want to have? So setting those goals, but realizing that the have is the outcome of what you're going to get from the be. So first you must be the person. Once you are that person, you then do those actions. When you do those actions, you'll have the result. And it always works in that order. You don't try and go after something if you're not prepared to be the person. Because, I mean, if you want to build it, and I can tell you as someone who owns a business, if you want to build a great business, you're going to get equal support and challenge. But are you able to accept that? Are you able to dedicate towards that and work towards that and work past those challenges and see it as rewarding and see how it's on the way, not in the way? Basically, is it something that is worth your investment? Is it going to wake you up in the morning and inspire you to go and do? If it's not, you're not going to have that outcome. And again, to relate it to finances, there are so many people who say, I want to be a millionaire. But if you watch their actions, what are they doing? Spending hours at the gym training, spending hours online learning how to pick up chicks, and then spending hours going out, drinking alcohol, and picking up chicks, right? Business, and then you ask them and you say, how many business books have you read? And they look at you blankly like, why would I read any business books? Well, you said you want to be a millionaire, right? Yeah, I want to be a millionaire. Well, hang on. Where is the value? You are not the person who's going to be a millionaire, because it's simply what your life demonstrates. It's not a value. It's a nice idea. But if that is a congruent goal, you will do action steps with vigor towards that. You'll have a spring on your step. Yes, I just read another book about business. Yes, I just listened to another podcast about business. Yes, I just put something else in play. So this is where the do component from the be component becomes very important, and then ultimately you'll have. So that would probably be my summary and message, I suppose, to you guys is just understand yourself and set congruent values, set congruent goals to your values. So you can either set goals around your values or values around your goals, but they have to be congruent, because if it's not, and don't judge yourself for your goals. You don't have a value on finances, fine. You don't have a value on finances, but honor thyself, you know, really honor yourself. I mean, there's such wisdom in that, and you know, live congruently to what you truly value in life.
What's the next big plan for you?
Still figuring that one out.
Your business is growing. It's really cool, man. It's very cool to see.
Yeah, business is growing. I mean, we've got 5 courses upcoming.
And you've been in business. Enterprise Fitness has been like 18 months or what?
Yeah, no, not that long. We opened up
less than that. Wow.
I mean, I've been PTing since 2006. So I mean, I've built it up since 2006, and then we moved to our facility now in March last year. So it's coming on 12 months in March.
Whoa, man! And you've grown that much, man. That's awesome, because I think in April you had 4 guys, and now you have all this crazy equipment. Looks like an awesome really place to work out.
Getting now.
Yeah, cool. And then like spreading the message. You got a podcast. You got you got a blog. You got websites. You actually have a lot of different things. What's a good central place for people to find you?
Probably for your guys, my blog. If you're in Australia, obviously, you know, you can look us up at my website, which is melbournepersonaltrainers.com. That's our enterprise fitness website. We're going to be opening up our blog part of that site soon. But, I mean, where all the information is, actually the 21 convention speech that I did is on it there as well. Yeah. That's my blog, which is maximusmark.com. It's also on iTunes, so if you search Maximus Mark on iTunes, you know, all the podcasts will appear. But all the information, articles that I've written, presentations that I've done, podcasts that I've done, there's hours and hours and hours of information on my blog. So that's probably the best place to go. And if they want more and they want to stay in touch, they can fill out their name and details on the site, and they'll be on a mailing list.
And that general message on Maximus Mark, would you say is what?
No bullshit. Just, like, here is the information and go for it. You know, like, go for it. And respecting the mind and body and your values. Yeah. So it's no nonsense information.
Man, it's awesome. That's awesome. Really good information. And I know you got to run. I probably kept you a little bit past, but dude, good stuff. I really dug it. Even for myself, it's like when you hear an excellent coach, when you hear an excellent trainer in whatever field, it's really beautiful to see and inspiring and all that sort of stuff. So cool things, man. It's awesome. Anyway.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
No, thank you for having me on. Absolute pleasure. And should do it again sometime.
Yeah, cool. All right. Take it easy, man.
See you, Steve.
Yeah.